everybody. On behalf of the Highland Park Public Library, we'd like to welcome you to Library in Your Living Room. We are pleased to present Shelf Isolation, a weekly mini-series about books, culture, and what to read next. I'm Sara, and this is your Information and Reader Services Department. In this episode, we are excited to share with you what we've been reading, watching, and or listening to during self-isolation. To begin our mini-series, I'm going to turn things over to Readers Roundtable expert and moderator, Michelle.
Thanks, Sara. So the first thing that I read this week was A Dutch House by Ann Patchett, which of course we've talked about tons on here, so I really won't go into details. I listened to the audio. It was really great. It was narrated by Tom Hanks. And with that, I do want to say that if you haven't listened to The Dutch House narrated by Tom Hanks, I recommend getting it on Hoopla because it's available there. It's really great. There's not much I can say about that. Everybody loves The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. So secondly, I wanted to talk about a podcast that I just discovered that's a lot of fun. It is called The Worst Bestsellers, and the tagline is reread stuff so you don't have to. A podcast by two friends named Kate and Renata, and they pretty much talk about the worst bestsellers. They say that they're not really snobs, so they don't really care what you read. One of the books they talked about is a book that you did enjoy, and that is okay. They're about an hour long, and they start with a summary of the book, and then they, of course, do a dramatic reading. And then they also, at the end, which is really great, do a reader's advisory portion, which means they talk about books that you can read along with that book or instead of that book. It's available anywhere you can get podcasts, and I'm very much enjoying it. And there's like 150 episodes, so you won't run out of things to listen to. And again, that's the Worst Bestsellers podcast. And that's actually all I have to talk about today, so I'm going to pass it on to Gus.
Thank you, Michelle. So this week for me is a reread, okay? I know yesterday was Halloween, and I did not dress up, for those of you that were wondering. But I did read, I don't want to say a scary one, but there's murder in it, okay? And it's pretty bad. But for those of you that have not read Erik Larson, pick up any of his books. I think you're going to like it. But one of my favorite ones is The Devil in the White City, and it is about the 1893 Columbia Exposition, the World's Fair. Also is about a horrible, horrible person by the name of H.H. Holmes, aka Mudgett. I forgot his real last name. But anyway, that was his alias. I don't know. He was one of the worst killers from that era ever. He was just like the worst person ever. I hadn't really heard about this guy before I read this. It was just unbelievable how bad he was, you know. I mean, so it kind of goes from the murders of H.H. Holmes and then to the Columbian Exposition and back and forth. But it's very well written, and it's one of my favorite Erik Larson books, and I highly recommend it. Like I said, the guy was just horrible, you know. So for those of you who read it, I think you know what I'm talking about. That's what I've been reading that again. Also, actually, I listened to that one the first time. This time I'm going to read it. But the audiobook is good on that one as well. Also, I've been playing a game, a scary one, because, you know, now I'm in the mood. Everybody's done with scary. I started. You know what I mean? I don't like to follow the crowd. I do after, you know? So today, or this week, I've been playing a little bit of a game called Alien Isolation. This is for the Xbox, PlayStation 4, and the Nintendo Switch. So it is a first-person shooter. And it's like its own story. It takes place in the Aliens universe, like if you've seen the movies. And this game, kind of like a continuation of it, and it's really freaky, very scary, and it's very well done. Highly recommend it if you haven't played it. It came out a couple of years ago. I believe it's rated M. So Nancy, you cannot wear it. You cannot. No, I say Nancy. Karen, Karen, you can't play it. All right, Lori, you can't. Nobody can play it, okay? But it's scary. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And with that, I will not give it to Nancy. I'm going to give it to Karen. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Gus. Sorry to throw you by changing the order a little bit, but I have more murder to talk about, I guess. I finished The Darkest Evening by Ann Cleeves. I talked about this a little bit last week. This is the 9th book in the Vera Stanhope series, set in Northumberland, Northeast England. And I hope it isn't the last. Vera keeps hinting about, retirement, and maybe this will be my last case, but so far, no steps seem to have been taken in that direction. So I talked a little bit about her physically, and I came up with a few more words. She's gruff, plain-spoken, very demanding boss, but she commands respect from her underlings. One of the characters described her as that woman who looks like a bag lady, and how can she be qualified to lead an investigation like this? And if you can imagine someone doesn't look like a detective at all, this would be a good book to read this winter. It takes place in December. There is a scene when they're having their evening briefing in the police station. I'm guessing about 7 p.m. A call comes in. There's a second victim has been discovered out in the woods in the snow. And Vera takes one of her team out there to check and see if it is indeed this missing woman that they think it might be. And it is. So Vera, I think this shows something about her personality. She could have said to the younger detective with her, here, you stay with the body. I'll go back to headquarters. I'll get the team out and the forensics people. But instead she says, you go back and get the forensics people and the pathologist. I'll stay with the body. And as she says, I owe her. If I'd been more patient when I first went to interview her, asked her the right questions, she'd still be alive. She was killed for the secrets she kept. So how often do you hear a detective talk like that? So I like these books, and I think there is a waiting list. I'll return this tomorrow morning, so we can move on to the next person. So, also, I guess my series of books recommended by patrons to me, one of the authors that someone brought up was Elly Griffiths. I'd never heard of her. She's a British writer, and she wrote the Ruth Galloway series. And this patron suggested I start with the first book called The Crossing Places by Elly Griffiths. And I just started this yesterday. It's a 13-book series at the moment. The main character is not a detective, but she's an archaeology professor. She gets called in to work with the police on cases. And the one that is just beginning is the case of a young girl's disappearance, I think 10 years ago. They think they've found her bones, but I'm not sure yet. So this is also taking place in England, Northeast England, in Norfolk. The author's website says the idea for this book came to her when she was on vacation with her husband. And her husband remarked that marshland was considered sacred by prehistoric people. It was neither land nor sea, but something in between, and possibly a bridge to the afterlife. So all of a sudden, this idea for the book came to her, and I'm enjoying her so far. She's got a self-deprecating sense of humor. It's fun reading, so the series looks promising. So I recommend that, as far as I know. And we will now hear from Sara.
Thanks, Karen. So first, I have a recommendation for my 2-year-old. This is Amy Wu and the Perfect Bao. And I've been trying to find more books with non-white characters. So I was excited to find this one about a Chinese American girl who is trying to make the perfect steam bun. Her mom makes perfect ones, her dad makes perfect ones, her grandma makes perfect ones. And so she figures it out by the end. But I think it's a great example for kids of sometimes it takes a lot of tries to get something. How you see grown-ups doing something and you think grown-ups have always been perfect. So it's a good growth mindset type book, but it's a cute story, really cute illustrations. And Henry likes finding the cat on every page because she has a cat. And after we read this, we had to make steamed buns, but I got the frozen ones from Trader Joe's because there is a recipe in the back of this, but it says it takes all day, and I don't have that kind of time. But cute book, and I happened to see while I was going through journals this weekend at work that there is a sequel coming out in December, and I don't remember the title, but cute book, highly recommend it. What I've been reading this week, the first book I read was What We Wish For by Katherine, which is, I think it's billed as women's fiction, but it's really a romance novel. The main character is a school librarian, and she's been at her school for a couple years. The school principal dies, so they bring in a new principal, and it turns out that he is a teacher that she used to work with at a different school, except at his old school, he used to be very eccentric, very fun, wore Hawaiian shirts and crazy ties, and now he is in three-piece suit, and only his main priority is school safety. And she doesn't know why he has changed in the few years that they've not seen each other, doesn't even know if he remembers her, because she used to just be kind of a wallflower. But and it ends up being a cute romance between the two of them, very funny in parts, and was a great audiobook. And then the second book I'm reading, and I actually have like 20% left in the book on my Kindle, and I really want to know how it ends. But it's The Half-Sister by Sandie Jones. And the novel begins, there are two sisters, Kate and Lauren. They're both married in their 30s. Kate is about to start her fourth attempt at IVF, and so because of that, she and her sister aren't on great terms. Her sister Lauren has 3 kids, a seemingly perfect marriage, which we quickly find out is not at all the case. But they are at their mother's house on a Sunday afternoon for dinner. Their father passed away 10 months earlier, and a young woman appears on their doorstep looking for their father and claims that she is his daughter. So Kate, the younger sister, is absolutely sure that her father could not have ever had an affair. This could not be his daughter. Lauren is less convinced. And so we get both of their perspectives shifting back and forth. At this point, I have no idea. I've probably not even 100 pages left. And I have no idea if this woman is actually their half-sister or not. But very intense. I started listening to it in the car on the way home from work yesterday, and then quickly switched to reading it on my Kindle because I can read faster than I can listen. So I highly recommend this. It definitely reminds me of like Lisa Jewell and Leanne Moriarty, who I enjoy both of their books. So that's what I've been reading this week, and I'll pass it on to Katherine.
Thank you, Sara. I have a couple of books this week. The first one is actually in a very similar time period to Devil in the White City, the book. So I would recommend that. David Zuccino actually won a Pulitzer for his journalism back in the 1980s, reporting on South Africa. So he's a good writer and really interesting to read. And then the other book that I read is fiction. It's called Night Boat to Tangier by Kevin Barry, the Irish author. And our characters are Maurice Hearn and Charlie Redmond. They're 2 longtime drug smugglers who are waiting at the ferry terminal for a certain young woman. It's sort of the middle of the night. Boats are coming and going. They're not sure if she is coming or going, but they think that she's going to be passing through on that date. This is sort of like a deconstructed crime novel. There's really not that much crime going on at the moment in the story. We just kind of have the criminals who are sitting there talking to one another. And as the night unfolds, we get their whole story. The audiobook, which I would highly recommend, is read by Kevin Barry himself. I have not listened to him head-to-head with Tom Hanks, but I don't know. He might be even better. He has lovely words that he wrote and a lovely voice to listen to. So I really recommend this one in audiobook. And from there, we can go to Lori.
Thanks, Katherine. And since we're on the subject of Tom Hanks, it reminded me that I really enjoyed his book that he wrote, his book of short stories, which is called Uncommon Type. And Tom Hanks is really quite a typewriter enthusiast, like old typewriters. He collects them and he likes to write on them, and I like them too. So, and I like Tom Hanks, and it's also a very good audiobook because he narrates it himself. And I also listened to The Dutch House and was really happy that he narrated that. Anyway, so this past week I've been reading a book called Is This Anything by Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld is a comedian, and you may have heard of his TV show. It was called Seinfeld. A show about nothing, I think is what it was. It's basically a manuscript of bits. He would write his little stand-up, his little comedy bits, and he would put them in accordion files. And during, the shelter-in-place order, I guess he took them all out, and they're in somewhat chronological order. And it's kind of fun to read. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't fall back asleep and you're worrying, you can read some Seinfeld bits. So that was enjoyable. I did read it. I did not listen to it on audio. I would guess maybe Tom Hanks narrates it. I don't know. I'm joking about that. And I am listening to an audiobook, Mrs. Lincoln's Sisters by Jennifer Chiaverini. It'll be in the show notes. She's written a series of historical novels, I think based around Mary Todd Lincoln and other historical characters. I think she also has another series about quilters. So this, I don't think it's the first in the series, but it takes place, I did not know Mary Todd Lincoln was one of like 6 children, and her mother passed away giving birth to the youngest, and then her father remarried and they had like another many children. And Mary Todd Lincoln, she was kind of a controversial figure later on in her life. Her son had committed as being insane. Her only surviving child, Robert Todd Lincoln, had her committed as being insane, and she was in an asylum in Batavia, Illinois. So in this story, it kind of goes back and forth with the sisters growing up, a group of the sisters growing up. So it goes back and forth from the 1830s through I guess it's the 1870s, the time when Mary has been committed to the asylum, but she talks her way pretty much out of there and goes to live with the eldest of her sisters in Springfield. And it's pretty good, although Tom Hanks does not narrate it. The narrator's okay. And that's pretty much what I've been up to this week. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Sara.
Thanks, Lori. And that's it for today, folks. As always, please remember that we are all here for you. We are available for comments, questions, or concerns that you may have, and you can reach us online through Facebook at facebook.com/hplibrary, through our Twitter, which is @hplibrary, or via email at hppla@hplibrary.org. Because the library's hours and services can change suddenly due to COVID, it's best to contact us via email or via chat on our website before coming to the library. Our music today was Carefree by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find more information about this and the titles we mentioned in our show notes below. Okay, everyone, this is us signing off. Until next time, stay safe.